He wasn't supposed to touch her, not even look at her that way. But when his hand brushed hers in that conference room, every rule she'd lived by began to unravel. If only she could allow it. Welcome back, Moonlight Dreamers, and if you're new, welcome to our channel where you don't find captivating stories, it finds you. If you love romantic tales that stir your heart and haunt your sleep, make sure to like, subscribe, and let the moon guide you home each night. Let's dive back into our story. Juliet Cole never expected a day like this. From the polished glass walls of the luxury brand's penthouse office, everything seemed meticulously ordered, except the tension knotting in her stomach. Today, a consultant was arriving, a freelancer supposedly highly recommended. But Juliet didn't do surprises. She ran operations like a well-oiled machine, and unpredictability made her uncomfortable. And then Evan Reed walked in. He was 27, but carried himself with an aura far older, as if he'd seen the world's secrets and learned how to wield them. Confident, magnetic, unnervingly perceptive. The moment he met her gaze, he didn't just look at her. He studied her, scanned her like an open blueprint as though he could read moods, predict reactions, and anticipate hesitation before it even arrived. Juliet stiffened, not out of fear, but curiosity. Who was this man who dared to look at her so openly, so deeply? "Ms. Cole," he said smoothly, his voice low but confident, warm without being intrusive. "Thank you for having me." Something about the tilt of his head, the micro smile that hinted he already knew more than he should, set her pulse a little faster. She gestured toward the sleek leather chairs in the middle of the office. "Please, have a seat." He didn't rush. He lingered by the desk for a heartbeat longer, then slowly lowered himself into the chair, eyes never leaving hers. Juliet tried to maintain her usual composure, cool, detached, untouchable, but inside, a spark flickered. She didn't know why, but there was something dangerously magnetic about him, like he had a way of slipping past defenses she didn't realize she still had. The interview began with business, strategies, projections, but she could feel him peeling back layers of her attention, reading between every word. He asked questions she hadn't thought anyone cared about, insights about operations, people, motivations. And yet, beneath the professional dance, she sensed a personal undertone, almost teasing, like he was daring her to acknowledge it. Juliet found herself both impressed and unnervingly aware of the warmth creeping through her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. She shifted in her seat, attempting to push it down, but it lingered. His perceptive gaze followed her every micro-expression, and for a fleeting moment, she wondered, had anyone ever really seen her like this? As the meeting concluded, they stood. Their hands met in a firm handshake. Heat shot through her fingers, an unexplainable flicker of something forbidden yet electric. Her chest tightened, and she instinctively pulled away too quickly, startling even herself. Evan's eyes didn't blink. They lingered, knowing, almost amused. "I think we're going to accomplish great things together, Ms. Cole," he said, voice low, compelling. Juliet swallowed, forcing a smile, but her mind betrayed her. Who was this man, and why did he make her feel things she had long buried? For the first time in years, Juliet wondered if she could allow herself to feel again. As Evan left the room, she lingered near the door, heart still racing, and caught herself thinking of him. Not his expertise, but him. What had he just done to her carefully guarded composure? Juliet's mind wouldn't let Evan go. The moment his tall figure disappeared down the corridor, she felt an itch she couldn't scratch, an unfamiliar restlessness that hovered over her office like morning fog. She told herself it was nothing. A new consultant, impressive but irrelevant. Her composure demanded she ignore it, yet the universe seemed to have other plans. Later that morning during the weekly operations meeting, Evan's presence filled the room in a way she hadn't anticipated. He didn't just sit quietly. He leaned in, subtly challenging her ideas, offering alternatives with the calm confidence of someone who believed he knew better. The team listened, captivated. Juliet bristled, her authority nudged by his unspoken assertion. "Ms. Cole," Evan said, voice steady, "have you considered streamlining the client onboarding process through a layered engagement model? It might reduce friction by at least 20%. Her brow lifted. She thought she had every angle covered, yet the logic in his proposal was undeniable. She caught herself nodding, carefully, professionally, but inside something fluttered. Irritation? Or was it curiosity again? That spark she couldn't name flared up once more. The meeting ended with polite applause, but Juliet was restless. By the afternoon, she found herself wandering past the break room, only to discover Evan standing there, balancing a tray with 2 steaming coffees. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering her a cup with a faint, mischievous smile. "Apologies if I came off forward this morning." Juliet raised an eyebrow, caught off guard by the combination of humility and charm. She accepted the coffee. Their fingers brushed, just lightly, but enough to send a shiver up her arm. The same spark ignited, hotter this time, unspoken but undeniable. Her pulse quickened, her lips parted as though to speak, yet no words came. For a moment they just stood there, the office buzzing around them yet somehow irrelevant, the world reduced to the electric tension between 2 people. Juliet forced herself to step back, setting the cup down on the counter, trying to regain composure. Then came the sharp click of a camera shutter. A junior colleague, trying to hide a grin, had snapped a photo from across the room. Their brush of fingers, the stolen moment of unspoken connection, captured forever. Juliet's eyes widened. Evan glanced at her, amused but calm, as if the sparks between them didn't faze him. She, on the other hand, felt exposed, vulnerable and alive in a way she hadn't in years. Rumors would travel fast in an office like this. And as Juliet realized what had just happened, her heart sank and raced at the same time. What would happen when everyone saw? The office buzzed with whispers, each glance from a colleague landing like a tiny spark against Juliet's composure. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened her laptop, pretending to focus, but the image of Evan's fingers brushing hers replayed in her mind like a secret she couldn't shake. She clenched her jaw and reminded herself. Boundaries, professionalism, control. By mid-morning, Evan wandered casually into her office, coffee in hand, as if he owned the place, which, in a way, he did, at least in the realm of her thoughts. "Good morning, Ms. Cole," he said with that infuriating ease. "I thought you might want a fresh cup before diving into the next report." Juliet's chest tightened. She forced a polite smile, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Thank you, Evan. But remember, this is a professional environment. Let's keep things—" "Professional?" he interrupted, a slow, amused smile curling his lips. His eyes, sharp and teasing, met hers. "Then maybe you should stop looking at me like that." Her hand froze mid-sentence, the words dying on her lips. Looking at him like what? She hadn't meant anything. Had she? Heat surged to her cheeks and she realized she'd been holding his gaze far too long. There was a dangerous thrill in how he pushed her buttons without seeming to try. "Evan," she said firmly, clearing her throat. "We maintain boundaries here. You understand that, right?" He leaned slightly closer, still holding the coffee, unbothered by her attempt at authority. "Of course. But boundaries are more interesting when they're tested." Juliet swallowed hard. Her logical mind screamed retreat, yet her body, her instincts, and some foolish, unfamiliar part of her soul were drawn in. She wanted to resist, but she also wanted to see how far he would go. The day dragged on in a blur of spreadsheets, strategy meetings, and stolen moments. Every glance Evan threw her way felt like a challenge, every smile a promise she couldn't read yet. She forced herself to focus on work, but when she left the office that evening, she carried a weight that wasn't entirely professional. At home, she tried to distract herself, running through routines, tasks, even a book she'd promised herself she'd finish. But sleep was elusive. When she finally drifted off, her dreams betrayed her. In her mind, Evan was there, closer than appropriate, his presence inescapable. She felt warmth she shouldn't, desire she wouldn't admit, and tension that left her breathless, even in dream state. When she awoke, heart racing and sheets tangled, she stared at the ceiling, unsettled by the intensity of her own reaction. Could she trust her mind to separate professional from personal? Or had Evan already crossed lines she hadn't realized existed? Juliet couldn't ignore the lingering restlessness from the previous day. The memory of her dreams, Evan's teasing smile, and the undeniable pull between them clung to her like an invisible thread. Tonight, the luxury brand was hosting a high-profile gala, and she had no choice but to navigate it under the public eye. Wearing the armor of poise she had perfected over decades, Evan, naturally, would be there. And somehow, that knowledge both excited and unnerved her. The gala hall was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and elegantly dressed clients milling about like well-trained constellations. Juliet moved through the crowd with effortless grace, smiling, nodding, maintaining the perfect professional facade. She could feel Evan's presence before she saw him. There he was, tailored suit hugging his frame perfectly, exuding calm confidence even amid chaos. The evening began smoothly until the disastrous pitch. A junior executive fumbled, projections went missing, and murmurs rippled through the audience like a growing storm. Juliet felt her stomach drop. The night, her reputation, could implode in seconds. And then Evan stepped in. With a subtle nod, he took over the presentation, his voice calm, persuasive, magnetic. He restructured the pitch in real time, weaving in insights no one else had considered. Juliet watched, astonished, as clients leaned in, captivated by his brilliance. By the time he finished, the room erupted in applause. Her relief mingled with a thrill she hadn't expected. Evan hadn't just saved the moment, he had elevated it. Later, the gala continued with music and laughter, and somehow they found themselves near the dance floor. Before she could protest, he extended his hand. "May I?" Juliet hesitated but allowed herself to be led into the swirl of lights and music. As they danced, the world around them fell into a hush. Conversation, laughter, clinking glasses, none of it mattered. It was just the two of them, moving in rhythm, a subtle heat radiating from their closeness. Her chest pressed against his, and for the first time in years, Juliet felt unguarded, alive in ways she hadn't allowed herself to be. The music slowed, and Evan leaned closer. She felt the warmth of his breath, the faint scent of his cologne, the undeniable tension in his gaze. Her heart thumped wildly. "You're trembling," he whispered, almost inaudibly, as if sharing a secret only they could hear. Her breath caught. The distance between them vanished. The moment hovered on a knife edge, suspended between desire and restraint. He hovered so close Juliet could feel the pull. Would he cross the line into a kiss, or would she retreat before surrendering to the warmth she'd denied herself for so long? Juliet left the gala still reeling from Evan's whisper, the warmth of his nearness lingering like a stubborn echo. She told herself it was over. Professional boundaries restored, night concluded. But the memory of his eyes, the subtle brush of his hand on hers, and the rhythm of their dance refused to fade. She pressed the elevator button, relieved to have a moment to herself before heading to her car. Evan appeared beside her, calm and casually handsome, even in the harsh fluorescent light of the lobby. She tried to mask the lingering flutter in her chest, but he noticed anyway. The doors closed, and the elevator began its ascent. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and the cabin shuddered, grinding to a sudden jarring halt. A soft beep echoed, followed by silence. Juliet's pulse spiked. "Great," she muttered, forcing a wry smile. Stuck in an elevator. Perfect end to the night. Evan chuckled, a low, easy sound that seemed to fill the small space. "Not quite how I imagined my evening," he said. The warmth in his tone made her chest tighten. Minutes stretched on. Their nervous laughter broke the tension at first, her biting back a giggle at his playful commentary, his raised eyebrow, the way he tilted his head as if studying her reaction. The small cabin shrank around them, the hum of the halted machinery fading into background noise. Then came the quiet. Just breathing. Close, almost intimate. Juliet could feel the rise and fall of his chest with every inhale, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and the subtle warmth radiating from his body. Her own heartbeat seemed impossibly loud in the silence. They didn't speak. Words would have ruined the delicate tension, the dangerous thrill of being so close without crossing the invisible line. Her shoulder brushed his accidentally, or perhaps not, and a spark shot through her nerves, sharp and electric. She wanted to pull away but couldn't bring herself to move. Evan's gaze held hers, calm yet piercing, as if daring her to acknowledge what they both felt, but hadn't admitted. Her breath caught again, shallow, uneven, betraying her composure. Just as the moment reached an unbearable, intoxicating edge, the elevator jolted, lights flickering back to life. The doors began to slide open, and standing there in the hallway, framed by the building's stark lighting, was a figure Juliet never expected to see. Her ex-fiancé, eyes sharp, jaw tight, watching them both with an unreadable expression. Juliet froze, caught between the electric tension with Evan and the sudden presence of a man who had once held her heart. What would he do? And more importantly, what would she do? Juliet's pulse raced as the elevator doors closed behind her ex-fiancé, David. The briefest flicker of the past, old memories, laughter, heartbreak, collided violently with the electric tension she still felt from Evan. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped out into the lobby, trying to steady her breathing. How had he found out she'd be at the gala? And why now, after all these years? David's voice cut through the hum of the lobby. "Juliet, we need to talk," he said smoothly, almost too smoothly. His gaze was sharp, calculating. She noticed the subtle way he assessed the room, the way he lingered on her designer badge, an unspoken reminder that his interest in her might not be entirely personal. "I'm busy, David," she said coolly, keeping her composure. But even as the words left her mouth, she sensed the weight behind them, the ghosts of a relationship that had once burned bright, now repurposed as leverage. David stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "I'm serious. I know this merger is critical for your company, for both of us. You need someone who understands, someone who's committed." Juliet felt a shiver of unease. He wasn't here for her. He was here for control, for strategy. And yet, the old pull, the familiarity of his voice and presence, threatened to weaken her armor. Across the lobby, Evan's eyes caught hers. The look was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but it was sharp and knowing. He didn't move, didn't intervene, yet she felt it. He saw everything. He understood David instantly, reading past the charm and into the motives beneath. His expression carried a warning. "Trust your instincts, Juliet." She nodded subtly, a small affirmation to herself more than to him. David's gaze lingered longer than necessary before he finally stepped back, his smirk polite, yet dangerous. "We'll talk soon," he said, leaving her with the unmistakable sense that he intended to return and complicate everything. Back in her office later that night, Juliet tried to focus on work, on reports, anything to push David and the lingering memories away. But her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. A single message lit the screen. "Evan, if only you'd allow it. You'd feel what I feel." Her breath caught. The words were simple, yet loaded, heavy with meaning. They echoed everything she had tried to suppress: desire, curiosity, tension, and the danger of letting someone in again. She stared at the message, heart racing, mind spinning with possibilities, and felt a pull she couldn't resist analyzing over and over. The line between professional restraint and personal surrender blurred. Could she ignore it? Or would she finally allow herself to feel? Juliet stared at her phone, Evan's words still lingering on the screen. She shook her head, trying to clear the haze, but the message had done more than spark curiosity. It had unsettled her in a way she hadn't anticipated. She tucked the phone into her bag and focused on the weekend retreat, a client campaign requiring the whole team to relocate to a country estate for 2 days. The thought of fresh air and isolation was appealing, even if the timing with David's sudden reappearance was anything but. By the time the team arrived, a storm had already begun to sweep across the countryside. Rain pelted the windows, and the wind howled around the estate, creating a cozy, if slightly claustrophobic atmosphere. Everyone hurried inside, exchanging nervous laughter at the storm, unaware that it would grant Juliet and Evan a rare moment away from prying eyes. Later that evening, after team briefings and client presentations, Juliet found herself lingering in the lounge near the fireplace. The crackle of flames reflected off the polished wooden panels, casting a warm glow that softened the edges of her exhaustion and lingering anxiety. Evan approached quietly, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. "You look like you could use this," he said, handing her one. She accepted, brushing her fingers against his briefly. The spark she had tried to deny flared again. They sat close, shoulders almost touching, staring into the dancing flames. Silence stretched between them, comfortable but charged, until Evan broke it softly. "You ever feel alone, even when everything around you seems perfect?" Juliet's chest tightened. That question wasn't just professional, it was intimate, probing the spaces she had long hidden. She set down her mug, meeting his gaze. "All the time," she admitted quietly, her voice almost lost in the firelight. "I've learned to keep it buried. It's safer that way." He nodded, leaning slightly closer. "I know the feeling," he said, his tone low, almost confessional. "We're both very good at pretending the world doesn't get to us, but it does, in small ways." The storm raged on outside, thunder rolling over the estate, rain tapping rhythmically against the windows. The world seemed to shrink to the two of them. The fire, the storm, the quiet ache of truth they both carried. Juliet found herself listening, not just to his words, but to the subtle cadence of his breathing, the steady warmth radiating from his body. Then suddenly, the lights flickered and went out completely. Darkness enveloped the room save for the fire's soft glow. Thunder split the sky, lightning illuminating the room in jagged bursts. In that flash, Evan was inches away, his hand brushing hers, his breath warm against her ear. "You don't have to hide," he whispered. Juliet froze, heart hammering, torn between retreating to safety and succumbing to the pull she had fought for months. Could she trust herself, or would the storm outside mirror the one inside her? Juliet's nerves never fully recovered from the weekend retreat. Even as the team returned to the city, the image of Evan so close by the fireplace haunted her. But nothing prepared her for Monday morning. Her phone buzzed incessantly before she even reached her desk. Social media notifications, private messages, and company alerts had exploded. She froze as she scrolled. There it was, the photograph from the gala. Evan and Juliet's fingers brushing, caught in the fleeting moment of their coffee incident, plastered across blogs, gossip threads, and internal messaging channels. Panic rose in her chest like a tidal wave. The office buzzed with whispers as she stepped in, eyes burning with embarrassment. She could feel the stares before she even reached her office. HR had already called for an emergency inquiry, and rumor had it that suspension was on the table. Juliet's mind raced. She had worked years to cultivate a reputation of professionalism, control, and poise. Now, a single snapshot threatened to undo all of it in seconds. She didn't notice Evan at first, quietly observing from the corner, his expression unreadable but calm. Finally, he approached her desk, voice low, composed, but with a firmness that cut through her panic. "Juliet, don't let this consume you," he said, almost soothingly. "We'll handle this together." She glanced up, eyes wide. Together? Evan, this could ruin me. My career. Everything. He knelt slightly to meet her gaze. You didn't do anything wrong, he assured her. But the world loves to misinterpret, especially in offices like ours. Minutes later, HR summoned them both to the conference room. The tension was palpable. Colleagues stared silently, gossip thick in the air. Juliet's heart pounded as she prepared herself for the worst: formal reprimand, suspension, professional humiliation. Then Evan did something unexpected. He stood, shoulders squared, eyes locking with the HR director. This was my fault, he said clearly, loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear. I take full responsibility for the photograph and the circumstances surrounding it. Whispers erupted immediately. Colleagues exchanged stunned glances, mouths opening and closing. Juliet felt her jaw drop. What? Why would he do that? She wanted to protest, to object, but the look in his eyes, steady, protective, unwavering, told her she had no right to interfere. The room fell silent again, the weight of his declaration hanging over everyone like a charged storm cloud. Juliet's chest swelled with a mix of relief, shock, and an unexpected surge of emotion she couldn't yet name. As murmurs circulated and HR paused to reassess, Juliet caught Evan's gaze from across the table, calm, knowing, and infinitely magnetic. She realized with a jolt that his loyalty wasn't just professional, it was personal. And suddenly, the question loomed. Would she allow herself to feel what he had clearly already felt for her? The office had never felt colder. The echo of Evan's protective words in the HR meeting still lingered in Juliet's mind, but she could not allow herself to be swept away by gratitude, or something far more dangerous. Not now, not with everything at stake. She kept her composure flawlessly in front of the team, but behind closed doors, the struggle was real. Her pulse quickened every time Evan approached, every time his gaze lingered a moment too long, and she knew she had to draw a line. Later that afternoon, she found him by the coffee machine, casually stirring his cup, as if the last week's events hadn't happened. She squared her shoulders, heart pounding, and forced the words out with cool precision. Evan, we need to keep this professional, she said. Her voice was steady, though the tremor in her chest betrayed her. I can't allow anything at all, to compromise either of us. He looked up, expression calm, almost unnervingly so. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his lips, the one that had always unsettled her. I understand, he said softly. If that's what you need, I'll respect it. Respect. She wanted to believe him, and part of her did, but the warmth of his eyes and the subtle pull of his presence made her chest ache. She realized how desperately she wanted to push boundaries, even as her mind screamed caution. Days passed with a careful dance of polite smiles, restrained interactions, and controlled distance. Juliet felt an emptiness she hadn't anticipated, the absence of his nearness, the subtle thrill that came from every shared glance or accidental touch. Every coffee she made alone felt colder. Every meeting seemed duller without the sharp energy Evan brought. She told herself it was for the best. Protect the company, protect her career, protect her heart. But fate, as it often did, had its own plans. That afternoon, as Juliet passed the HR office, she overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. A hushed tone, punctuated by the finality in the speaker's voice. And with the recent complications, we've decided that Evan Reed's contract will be terminated immediately. Her stomach dropped. Her chest tightened. The room seemed to shrink, her pulse hammering in her ears. She had just pushed him away to safeguard them both. And now, he was in danger of being taken from her entirely, professionally, and possibly personally. She clenched her fists, torn between following the rules and acting impulsively. Could she risk everything to save him? Or would she stand by, letting the one person who had stirred her heart slip away forever? Juliet barely slept that night. The words she'd overheard in HR echoed relentlessly in her mind. Evan's contract terminated. She had kept her distance, convinced it was necessary, but the thought of losing him entirely, of never seeing those piercing eyes light up with understanding and challenge, filled her with an ache she hadn't expected. By morning, the office felt hollow. Every familiar corner seemed emptier, every conversation lacking the spark Evan had brought. She tried to focus, reviewing reports, presentations, schedules, but the void of his absence was undeniable. Then, at her desk, she noticed a small, neatly labeled USB drive sitting atop her stack of papers. "For when you're ready." The words were written in Evan's neat script. Her heart skipped. She picked it up carefully, as if it were fragile, and stared at it. A million questions swirled in her mind. Did he leave voluntarily? Was this goodbye, or a test of some kind? With trembling fingers, she plugged it into her laptop. A folder appeared, filled with strategy notes, graphs, and planning documents for the projects they had been working on together. It was meticulously organized, every detail reflecting his brilliance. But then she noticed one file that stood apart, a voice memo labeled "Listen Last." Juliet hesitated, breath shallow. She clicked play. Evan's voice filled the room, low, intimate, and undeniably personal. "Juliet, I never said this out loud. I never wanted to make you uncomfortable, never wanted to cross the line you set. But I need you to know the truth. Working with you, being near you, it's changed me. You taught me to feel again. Not just strategy, not just professional pride, but feeling, desire, longing, connection. I've never felt it like this with anyone." Her chest tightened, and a lump formed in her throat. She hadn't expected this. Every word he had spoken, every unspoken glance, every moment of tension she had tried to suppress, they were all real, and now she was hearing them confessed in the most personal way possible. The memo continued, describing details only she would know. The moments by the elevator, the coffee, the gala, the fireplace. Her pulse raced as each confession built upon the last. And then, softly, almost a whisper meant for only her, "You taught me to feel." Juliet sat back, stunned. Her hand shook, her mind a storm of emotions. Guilt for pushing him away, awe at his courage, and a longing she could no longer deny. For months she had fought the pull between them, insisting on professionalism, restraint. And now, faced with the raw, undeniable truth of his feelings, she realized that some barriers could no longer hold. Tears prickled her eyes as she stared at the screen. Could she allow herself to feel back, and if she did, would it be too late? Weeks slipped by, each day blending into the next. Yet the emptiness left by Evan's departure weighed on Juliet more than she cared to admit. The office hummed with the usual energy, clients signed contracts, and meetings ran on schedule. The company was thriving, on the strategies he had crafted, on ideas he had left meticulously documented. Every success, every accolade, was a reminder of what she had lost. Juliet threw herself into work, determined to maintain composure. She smiled during presentations, praised her team, and guided campaigns with precision. But behind the polished exterior, a quiet ache persisted. She missed the subtle sparks, the conversations that danced on the edge of personal and professional. She missed Evan, the way he challenged her, the way he understood her without her needing to explain, the way he made her feel alive. Evenings were the hardest. The apartment felt too quiet, too controlled. She found herself staring at the spot where she had opened his voice memo weeks earlier, replaying the soft words, "You taught me to feel." They echoed in her mind, refusing to fade. She had tried to ignore them, tried to bury the longing, but every time she succeeded professionally, her heart whispered the truth she had resisted. She missed him deeply. Her assistant's knock interrupted her reverie. A single envelope lay on her desk, stamped with the client's logo. She opened it carefully, eyes scanning the contents. An invitation. The client's annual strategy gala, a high-profile networking event. But there was one detail that stole her breath. Evan's new firm would be attending. Her stomach flipped. Seeing him again after weeks of absence, after pushing him away for her own protection, threatened to undo the careful balance she had tried to maintain. Would he be the same? Calm, teasing, magnetic? Would the spark still be there, waiting for her to acknowledge it? Juliet's fingers trembled slightly as she placed the invitation down. Part of her wanted to avoid it, to protect herself, to stay in the safe, controlled bubble she had created. But another part, a stronger, quieter part, whispered that she couldn't ignore the pull between them forever. For the first time in weeks, her heartbeat quickened at the thought of his presence. The air around her seemed charged with anticipation, the empty space he had left ready to be filled once more. She stared at the envelope, torn between fear and longing, knowing that attending would bring her face to face with him again. And with it, the undeniable question, could she allow herself to feel what he felt, before it was too late? The conference hall buzzed with energy. Executives networking, presentations echoing, screens glowing with polished infographics. Juliet maneuvered through the crowd, impeccably dressed, radiating the confidence she had built over years of experience. Yet underneath her professional exterior, her heart skipped whenever she imagined the possibility of seeing Evan again. She had tried to prepare herself, steel her emotions, maintain control, focus solely on the event. But fate had other plans. Across the hall, near a cluster of attendees discussing market trends, she caught sight of him. Evan. Different. Confident. Successful. Every bit the man he had always been, but now sharpened, refined, yet still carrying that familiar magnetic ease that had drawn her in from the start. Her pulse quickened. His eyes found hers almost immediately, locking across the distance like a thread pulling them together. The world around them seemed to blur, the chatter, the flashing lights, the clicking heels, all fading into a soft haze. It was just him, just her, and the invisible spark that had never truly died. Juliet's breath hitched, and she reminded herself to move, to engage with clients, to maintain control. But Evan's gaze was relentless, teasing, challenging, and it sent shivers down her spine she couldn't explain. Every step she took forward felt heavier, every handshake more distant than it should be. Minutes passed like hours, and the subtle tension between them was almost unbearable. Then, with a fluid motion, he approached, threading through the crowd with ease, a calm confidence that left her simultaneously nervous and exhilarated. Without a word, he stopped beside her, just close enough that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from his body. He handed her a small folded note, deliberate, teasing, his signature charm in every movement. Juliet's fingers brushed his lightly as she accepted it. Heat surged instantly, a reminder of every suppressed desire, every moment of tension they had shared over the months. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the paper. In neat, deliberate handwriting, the message read, "If only you could allow it again." Her chest tightened, her mind racing. Was he speaking about business, strategy, or was it about them? The unspoken tension, the longing she had tried to ignore, the spark that refused to be extinguished. Every nerve in her body hummed with anticipation, and for the first time in weeks, she felt utterly exposed to him. Around them, the conference continued oblivious, but for Juliet, the air was charged, the space electric. Every instinct told her to pull back, to maintain the careful distance she had fought to preserve. Yet every beat of her heart whispered the opposite. As she looked up from the note, Evan's eyes held hers, patient yet daring, and Juliet realized she had a choice: deny the pull she had spent months resisting, or finally let herself feel the connection she had buried for far too long. Juliet could hardly focus during the afternoon sessions. Evan's note burned in her mind, each word replaying over and over. If only you could allow it again. The ambiguity of it gnawed at her. Was he speaking about business, or something far more intimate? The questions lingered as she navigated client interactions, each handshake and exchange feeling unusually heavy. By evening, the conference had drawn to a close, and most attendees were heading to their hotels or after-parties. Juliet intended to slip away quietly, but Evan appeared beside her once again, casual and effortlessly magnetic, his presence impossible to ignore. "You look like you could use a break," he said, his voice low, teasing yet gentle. "There's a little bistro just around the corner. Care to join me?" Juliet hesitated, calculating. Professionally, there was no reason to go. Personally, every instinct screamed yes. She found herself agreeing before she could fully rationalize it. The bistro was warm and cozy, the dim lighting soft against the evening gloom. They sat across from each other, menus forgotten, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Laughter replaced tension as stories were shared, light, candid, teasing. Juliet found herself relaxing, letting her guard down in a way she hadn't allowed since he left the company. Evan's eyes held hers across the table, patient, attentive, and subtly charged with the same pull that had haunted her dreams. Outside, rain began to patter softly against the windows. Evan noticed Juliet glancing at it, then, without a word, removed his tailored jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it wasn't just from the fabric. It was from him. Juliet's pulse quickened, heart pounding with a mix of embarrassment and anticipation. She reached for the jacket, intending to return it politely, but he shifted slightly, his presence so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. His gaze was steady, hypnotic, and his voice a low murmur near her ear. "Then don't." Her fingers froze on the edge of the jacket. The subtle invitation in his words was impossible to ignore. The warmth of the fabric, the nearness of his body, the familiarity of his eyes, it all threatened to collapse the careful walls she had built. Juliet's mind raced, a battle of restraint and desire. Every professional boundary she had insisted upon seemed trivial compared to the pull she felt now, raw and undeniable. She wanted to pull back, to maintain control, yet part of her needed, to lean in. The soft drizzle outside mirrored the storm of her thoughts, the quiet tension between them building into something palpable. Juliet's breath caught as she realized she was inches from him, the jacket a bridge between them, and she had a choice. Step back into caution or finally give in to the moment she had fought for months to resist. Juliet left the bistro that night with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The warmth of Evan's jacket lingered around her shoulders, but more than that, the memory of his near whisper, the subtle pull in his eyes, followed her like a shadow. For the first time in months she felt a flicker of something she couldn't ignore, desire, anticipation, and a dangerous sense of longing. Back at the office on Monday, the atmosphere was tense. Something was off. Whispers circulated, colleagues exchanged knowing glances, and the subtle hum of speculation buzzed in the air. Juliet's heart sank as she caught sight of her assistant, frantically gesturing toward her laptop. On the screen, photos, more photographs. This time from the gala, this time new, edited to exaggerate closeness. The captions were suggestive, designed to provoke gossip. Back together already? Juliet and Evan, office romance confirmed. Her stomach dropped. The careful distance she had fought to maintain, between herself and Evan, between professionalism and temptation, was now threatened by an external force she couldn't control. It didn't take long for the rumors to reach upper management. Within hours, HR had called an emergency meeting, and whispers of corporate repercussions circulated like wildfire. Juliet sat stiffly in the conference room, heart pounding, as colleagues tried to feign indifference while throwing sharp glances at her. Evan entered quietly, calm and composed despite the storm around them. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement of shared frustration, and a spark of something else. Something deeper, more dangerous. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Juliet felt his presence, protective and reassuring, even in the chaos. Minutes later, the board joined them. The atmosphere was cold, clinical, and unforgiving. A senior director spoke, voice clipped and deliberate. "Ms. Cole, the board is concerned. The recent media and internal attention cannot continue. Your position is at stake. Your judgment will be questioned." Juliet's chest tightened. She held her composure as long as she could, but the words hit harder than she expected. And then came the ultimatum, delivered with chilling precision. "You must make a choice, Juliet. Your position in this company, or your association with Mr. Reed." The room fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing down like an invisible hand. Juliet's mind raced, heart pounding as conflicting thoughts and emotions collided. Every instinct screamed to protect her career, to uphold the walls she had built. But every beat of her heart, every lingering thought of Evan, reminded her that some connections could not be ignored or erased. Juliet stared at the board, torn, caught between ambition and desire, realizing that the choice she faced wasn't just professional, it was personal, and the moment she decided would change everything between her and Evan. Juliet sat at her desk long after the board meeting had ended, staring blankly at the polished surface before her. The ultimatum from the board echoed relentlessly in her mind. Your position, or Evan. Every principle she had lived by, every strategic decision she had made suddenly felt irrelevant. Her career, her reputation, her carefully built walls, they all seemed meaningless against the pull she felt toward him. She thought of his eyes that day at the conference, the warmth of his jacket at the bistro, the subtle whispered confessions she had heard on his voice memo. She thought of the way he had saved her reputation, the way he had always understood her when no one else could. And for the first time in months she admitted something she had long denied. She was tired. Tired of holding back, of feeling nothing, of pretending that control and professionalism were more important than living fully. Minutes later, she drafted a resignation letter, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. She read it aloud softly, words tasting like liberation and fear. I resign. Not because of the company, not because of politics, but because I'm tired of feeling nothing. I want to feel everything, even if it scares me, and right now, that means stepping away to find what truly matters. She left the letter on her desk, signed and time-stamped, a quiet rebellion against fear, against expectation, against the emptiness she had allowed to dominate her life. Without looking back, she walked out of the office, the hum of the building fading behind her, replaced by the pulse of possibility, freedom, and danger. Evan arrived later that day, as always calm, collected, unaware of her decision. He saw the letter on her desk immediately, his eyes scanning the words with a mixture of shock, awe, and something deeper, something unspoken. His fingers trembled slightly as he read, realizing the magnitude of what she had done. But as he glanced around, expecting to find her nearby, she was gone. The desk was empty, the chair still warm with her absence, and the office felt impossibly large and silent. Panic threatened to rise, but he forced himself to stay calm, heart hammering with questions he couldn't yet answer. Her letter spoke of freedom, of choice, of surrendering to feeling. But her absence left an impossible question hanging in the air. Had she gone to him? Or had she vanished completely, leaving him with only words and no person? Evan's mind raced, heart clenched, and breath caught. Where had she gone? And more importantly, would he ever find her before someone, or something, kept them apart forever? Evan couldn't focus. The resignation letter burned in his mind like a brand, but worse was the fact that Juliet was gone, vanished without a word beyond the words she had left behind. Her absence gnawed at him, not just professionally, but personally. Every corner of the office, every shared glance, every unspoken moment now seemed hollow, meaningless. He began retracing her steps. He called mutual contacts, checked flight manifests, scoured the city's familiar haunts, and even the little cafes she liked. Nothing. Every lead ended in dead silence, until finally, a tip from a local art supply store, A small coastal shop she had once visited to pick up brushes, gave him direction. The drive along the coast was long and the wind whipped through the car windows as Evan's mind replayed everything. The note in the conference hall, the jacket at the bistro, the voice memo that confessed what words had failed to convey. She hadn't just left her career behind. She had fled to find herself, to feel again, to breathe freely. And the thought of her out there, alive and discovering herself, warmed him even as it stoked the fire of longing inside him. He found the apartment perched on a cliffside, its large windows overlooking the restless waves. The door was slightly ajar. Music drifted softly, mingling with the rhythmic crash of the surf. He pushed the door open quietly, careful not to announce himself prematurely. Inside, sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, dust motes dancing in the golden rays. The studio was scattered with canvases, some completed, others half-finished. Paintbrushes and tubes of color lay in organized chaos. And there, in the center of it all, was Juliet. She stood before a large canvas, brush in hand, strokes deliberate and passionate. The rhythm of her movements mirrored the waves outside, free, uncontrolled, beautiful. She was radiant, loose hair framing her face, paint flecked across her fingers and arms, entirely immersed in the world she had chosen for herself. Evan felt the tight knot in his chest loosen slightly, replaced by awe, longing, and an ache that made his heart pound. She had found herself again, vivid, alive, untamed. Then, without a sound, he stepped into the doorway. The wooden floor creaked under his weight. Juliet froze mid-stroke, brush hovering above the canvas. Slowly she turned. Her eyes met his, wide and startled. And then, in a breathtaking mixture of relief, joy, and vulnerability, she smiled through tears. The air between them was electric. Evan's heart raced, and Juliet's chest heaved as the moment stretched. Would this reunion ignite the passion they had both resisted, or would the fear of the past hold them back once more? The morning light poured through the studio windows, warming the room and Juliet's face as she stirred cups of tea for them both. Evan sat cross-legged on the floor, watching her move among the scattered canvases and brushes, his gaze quiet, but intense. Silence hung comfortably between them, yet beneath it, a tension simmered, a delicate balance of longing, fear, and unspoken truths. Juliet poured the tea carefully, hands steady, though her pulse betrayed her nerves. "I didn't want to depend on anyone," she said finally, her voice low, almost lost in the hum of the waves below. "I was afraid of losing myself if I let someone in again." Evan took a slow sip of his tea, eyes never leaving hers. "You're alive, Juliet," he said softly. "And I never wanted to change that. I just wanted to remind you what it feels like to really feel." Her chest tightened. The words, simple yet profound, hit deeper than any gesture or confession before. For months she had pushed him away, professionalism, fear, pride. But hearing him articulate this truth broke something inside her. She wanted to argue, to deny it. But the warmth of his gaze, the sincerity in his tone, left her without words. They spent the day moving from canvas to canvas, painting side by side, letting the rhythm of creation guide them. Laughter occasionally broke the silence, soft and spontaneous, a release of all the tension they had carried for months. At one point, Juliet paused to examine a canvas, her hand brushing against Evan's as they reached for the same brush. The contact was electric, familiar, and startling. Their eyes met, both acknowledging without speaking what their bodies already knew. The pull between them was undeniable. She pulled back slightly, then caught herself. His presence wasn't threatening. It was grounding. His nearness reminded her of the spark she had resisted, the warmth she had tried to ignore. They returned to painting, hands working close, fingers occasionally brushing, hearts beating faster with each contact. Evan offered subtle guidance, leaning in slightly, his shoulder brushing hers. Juliet felt the familiar fire ignite again. Not just desire, but the thrill of connection, the intimacy of someone who truly saw her. By late afternoon, the sunlight shifted, painting golden streaks across the room. Juliet glanced at her hand, now streaked with paint, and realized Evan's hand was next to hers, also covered in colors. Their fingers met over the canvas. Warmth surged through her again, the same undeniable spark, and she realized with a shiver that some resistances were never meant to last. The coastal apartment was quiet that morning, save for the rhythmic crash of the waves below. Juliet sipped her coffee, staring out at the horizon, letting the cool breeze drift through her hair. Life felt different now, freer, brighter, and terrifyingly uncertain. She had stepped away from her career, from control, and in doing so, discovered how much she had been holding herself back. Her phone buzzed insistently on the counter. A glance at the screen made her heart skip. It was an email from her former company, the very firm she had walked away from weeks ago. The subject line read simply, "A proposal you can't refuse." Curiosity and caution warred inside her as she opened it. The message was formal, almost hesitant, but its meaning was clear. They wanted her back as a consultant, this time collaborating directly with Evan's firm. And the offer was generous: equal partnership, autonomy, creative freedom, and recognition of the value she brought. Juliet set the phone down, mind racing. The chance to return on her terms with Evan by her side, not just professionally but personally in the unspoken bond that had grown between them, was unprecedented. She thought of the months they had spent apart, the sparks, the longing, the quiet realizations they had shared in the studio, and she realized that this wasn't just a professional opportunity. It was the chance to build something with him together. Later that day, they met to discuss the offer. Evan's calm confidence radiated as he reviewed the terms, but there was a subtle light in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Pride, yes, but also a playful anticipation. "Equal partners," he said, smiling, "and no compromises on creativity." Juliet matched his grin. "Agreed," she said, "and this time, we do it on our terms." The agreement solidified their partnership, professionally and emotionally. For the first time in months, Juliet felt a thrill of certainty mixed with excitement, a rare feeling for someone who had spent so long defending herself. And with Evan beside her, she knew the spark they had nurtured could finally become something more. Weeks passed, and their collaboration began seamlessly. At client meetings, they moved with ease, a perfect balance of professionalism and unspoken intimacy. Their synergy was undeniable, and whispers of admiration followed them. Then, at a high-profile client gala, the lights dimmed, music swelled, and the crowd pressed in around them. Evan leaned close as they discussed a proposal, his breath grazing her ear. He whispered, low and teasing, "So this time, no rules?" Juliet's pulse surged, the promise of both professional partnership and unrestrained desire hanging between them. The conference room hummed with anticipation as Juliet and Evan stepped up to deliver the joint presentation. Clients, executives, and industry insiders filled the space, their eyes scanning the sleek screens and crisp materials laid out meticulously. But beyond the charts, graphs, and strategic insights, a subtler element held the audience: the chemistry between the two presenters. Juliet's confidence radiated as she spoke, every word measured, precise, and compelling. She glanced at Evan once, just a flicker, and found him leaning slightly toward her, sharing subtle nods and encouraging smiles. He answered questions smoothly, effortlessly, his voice calm yet magnetic, and the ease of their interaction was palpable. Together, they weren't just presenting a plan. They were performing a duet of intellect, charm, and unspoken connection. Clients whispered, impressed not only with the strategy, but with the dynamic that seemed to radiate from them. Colleagues exchanged glances, some curious, some envious, all noting the spark that made every explanation, every slide, more engaging. And all the while, Juliet could feel it. The heat behind his eyes, the energy that flowed between them like an electric current she couldn't resist. When the final slide appeared, Juliet concluded with poise and authority, leaving a silence that hung in the room for just a moment before the applause erupted. Hands clapped, some standing, some murmuring in admiration, but her attention was entirely on Evan. His glance held hers for longer than it should, a small, knowing smile tugging at his lips. As the crowd's applause softened, he reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers in a way that sent warmth spiraling through her. He lifted it slowly, deliberately, and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was neither rushed nor hidden. It was open, confident, and unmistakably intimate. Juliet's breath caught, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Every barrier she had built over months, the fear, the caution, the distance, crumbled in that one deliberate motion. The applause, the room, the onlookers all faded into insignificance. It was just them, and the undeniable truth that the spark between them could no longer be denied or ignored. Evan's eyes met hers, warm and unwavering. "No more rules," he murmured, the words brushing across her consciousness like a promise. Juliet's pulse raced, mind spinning with desire and uncertainty. Could she allow herself to truly surrender to him here in the open, or would the world's scrutiny make them pull back again? The answer hovered tantalizingly, just out of reach. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their shared apartment, casting long streaks of gold across the hardwood floors. Juliet moved slowly, deliberately, savoring the calm and freedom she had fought so hard to reclaim. The city hummed faintly below, but in this space, time felt hers alone. She poured coffee, set it beside Evan, and watched him sketch out notes for a new campaign. His hair fell casually across his forehead, eyes focused, every motion purposeful yet relaxed. It was ordinary, yet the sight of him stirred her in ways no ordinary routine could. The spark she had resisted for months had blossomed into a warmth that guided her every decision, every heartbeat. Juliet picked up her phone, scrolling through the countless photos and messages marking the weeks since their reunion. She realized something profound. The feeling she had once feared, dependency, vulnerability, desire, had transformed into her compass, guiding her choices, her creativity, and her joy. For the first time, she no longer feared the pull she felt toward Evan. She embraced it. She walked over to him, slipping her hand into his. Fingers interlaced, hearts beating in quiet sync. Their laughter mingled, soft and unrestrained, echoing the intimacy they had cultivated through months of tension, longing, and subtle confessions. Here, there were no rules, no walls, no professional facades, only the honesty of feeling, shared freely. Juliet's gaze drifted toward the camera set up for a personal vlog she had promised herself she'd record. Part reflection, part confession, part reminder that some moments were meant to be shared. She smiled softly, eyes glimmering with warmth and satisfaction. "You'd feel what I felt too," she whispered, her voice steady yet full of emotion. The words were a promise, a challenge, a completion of the journey she had walked with Evan by her side. And then, almost imperceptibly, the familiar voice memo from weeks ago played softly in the background, the one Evan had left on the USB. "You taught me to feel." Her words blended seamlessly with his, echoing in the room, a perfect harmony of confession and acknowledgement. The circle was complete. The distance, the tension, the longing, they had all led to this, a mutual surrender to feeling, to desire, to connection. The camera lingered on her face, radiant and peaceful, before slowly pulling back to reveal Evan leaning toward her, hands still intertwined, the sunlight highlighting the gentle curve of their closeness. The city outside continued unaware, but inside, they had created a world of their own. As the memo faded, Evan whispered from behind her, "And now, we never have to hide it." Juliet's lips curved in a mischievous, knowing smile. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with the intoxicating question, what will they allow themselves to feel next?